The Kane Stories by Seth Gill, copyright by Seth Gill, read by Seth Gill. Chapter 4, Part 1, First Steps. Hashan paused in his steps yet again. The wind smelled wrong. There was no flowering scent or accent of nearby trees. There was a hint of nearby stream, but nothing sweet enough touched his nose, and the wind was too strong. His arm flaps begged for tall heights to glide down from, and his hands begged for bark to dig into for a worthwhile climb. It was all so wrong. Where were his trees to climb to get a good view of where he was going? Where were the animals moving swiftly along the ground and among the treetops beside him? He turned back to stare at the horizon longingly. His forest sat there, but no longer his forest. Had he done right leaving her a few feet in? Hashan knew the other Talikish would find her and take her back to the others. She'd be given the proper rights he couldn't offer where he was going, but shouldn't he have stayed? It wasn't just the plains, long, dry grass and wind with no buffers. He wouldn't just be a few hours apart from Simoa anymore. It would be forever. He wasn't sure he was strong enough to face that, no matter what answers he might find where he was going. He was finding answers for her, too. Somewhere he knew she watched him. She would know what he knew when he got there. But it wasn't the same. He turned back around, flexed his shoulders, shook out his ear flaps, and walked on. Beside him, Caislan made for a silent partner. The old Kosi glanced warily around from time to time, but said little. He'd point and guide them a path through the plains, and he'd grumble. He'd scratch at his clothes and adjust his bag on his back. Hashan had to shake his head more than once. It was like Caislan hadn't done more than push buttons and light torches all his life. The old Kosi had known some level of serious walking and steady lifting before now, hadn't he? If not, this was going to be a very long trek, and the mountains were still a long ways off along that horizon. Why do you steer us from the best water and shade? Hashan groaned late into the first day. He made sure to avoid four bodies where they'd fallen. The war that had overtaken the plains had left Dosha, Kamai, and Katailia at odd angles. Their weapons weren't of interest to Hashan, but he had retrieved some arrows for his bow. The quiver on his back was now full. He'd even grabbed a second quiver at one point, and it was full too. I don't mind a good walk, but I need a rest now and then too. Caislan smiled, offering a tired nod. The Dosha make their homes under the larger tree clumps, he explained. They burrow their dens out and use the roots for bugs and leaves for shade. They mark the den trees quite well to ward off other Dosha and Maznikan. They're cousins? The red race we've been spotting on the horizon in bits, Caislan insisted. Like them there. He pointed to a point far right. Hashan considered the red shape standing on all fours with that yellow stripe running up its forehead. The Maznikan darted off, and Caislan nodded. They're nonverbal, he continued, walking again, Hashan keeping pace. They're quite feral, in fact. The marking of the trees is more to ward them off than anything else. And how do you know which trees have dens under them? Hashan challenged. They bow more than the others. See how those ahead lean? The roots are intact underneath, but because of the burrowing, the tree's not as strong, so it leans. And as much as most of these bodies we're finding are dosha, some likely survived. And they're not likely friendly to anyone green like us. They'll figure we're more kamai before stopping to check for details. They'll attack, and they might just succeed. Hashan frowned. So we avoid their dens, he summarized sourly. Caislan nodded and pointed them onto an altered path again. So why aren't they attacking? Caislan glanced across. The Mazni can, Hashan pressed. Why aren't they attacking us? Don't they figure we're the enemy too? Have they no loyalty to the Dosha they've shared this plane with for so long? They do, Caislan confirmed. But they likely fear anyone green at this point, and they're generally timid race. They're feral when they're hungry, yes, and they do challenge intruders, but as long as we don't threaten them, they're likely going to just leave us be. Hashan made sure the arrow he had notched was still in place. He wasn't trusting they were safe by any means, so he wasn't relaxing his grip on that weapon no matter how confident the Kosi sounded. Approaching the one set of trees surrounded by all that open space, three birds took flight. Hashan grinned, letting his first arrow fly. He drew another arrow and took aim at the other two birds in quick succession. The second arrow struck true, and that second bird dropped. The third one got away, but Hashan was good with that. There was no call for being greedy on a proper hunt if a Talakish wanted more hunt in the future. He gathered up his game, and they made a low fire near the shelter of some overhanging boughs. They had enough space the flames wouldn't catch, and the fire wouldn't be as visible to someone out on the prowl. Plus, this way, with the flames kept low and wind cover offered, the fire didn't dance so much. Keslan watched Hashan skin, then begin to pluck the first bird with wide eyes. Never prepared game? Hashan mused with a smart grin. Keslan shrugged uneasily. Well, no, he replied rather succinctly. We have a worker class that finds, prepares, and cooks our food for us. He smiled politely. It's rather barbaric, really, watching it done. Sean had to blink a few times. He tossed the unfinished bird across. No time to learn like the present, he insisted. Caislan frowned. Hashan just started on the second bird, slowly shaking his head. We have a class system of sorts, the Talakish suggested, but we all know how to hunt and defend our own. We all know the measure of a good day's work. We've all hiked long and no tired feet, and we don't hide from work behind others. It makes us stronger. Caislan gingerly pulled a few of the feathers that remained on his given bird. I won't argue it makes your people more hardy than mine, he conceded. He paused to consider the work ahead with disdain. But there's also merit to a well-developed mind. Hashan watched Caislan slowly pluck his bird like the thing would jump up and start flapping its wings to take flight. He watched while preparing the second bird, wondering how any race could have forgotten the basics. By the time Caislan was done, the second bird was already cooking. Hashan placed the birds side by side with equal share of the warm flames. The silence crept in again, making Hashan sigh. What's up with your eye? He asked, while basting the steaming birds. My eye? Caislan asked. You're missing an eye, Hashan groaned. Caislan smiled and nodded. It was removed, he offered offhandedly. We are born with both, of course, much like the founders to whom we're more closely tied. The one eye is taken when we're young. It's offered up in sacrifice, as you might say, in exchange for a life of learning. Hashan had to smirk. You let them cut it out. Caislan shrugged. In a manner, he conceded, Hashan shaking his head unbelieving. True understanding and the search of knowledge, Caislan expanded sagely, requires the acceptance that true sight is not simply what you see with your eyes. True sight can only be achieved with your mind. Thoughts and mental achievements matter more than simple sight. So we forsake one eye as proof that we are truly giving ourselves to the pursuit of a truer mental sight, and not merely relying on what one can see on the surface. Hashan just continued to shake his head. You're mad. Maybe, but it's our way. It's been our way for generations. Their way. Hashan felt bitterness at that notion so simply said. We'll need water soon, Hashan suggested, swallowing that bitterness as best he could. Is there one place better than the others? You seem to know everything about everyone and everywhere, he grumbled dejectedly. A forced swallow. Where should we drink? Hashan accepted some things he couldn't ignore, after all. I don't know everything, Caislan countered stubbornly. He paused to swallow some other words in turn, then glanced guiltily around. It is not to be rude that we watch, he continued a moment later. We simply study life, without living it. Over polite glares locked. You're likely right, Caislan grudgingly accepted. It, like the eye, is simply what we've done for as long as there've been Kosi. To chastise me for watching my view screens is like going after a bird that flies or a Talakish that hovers. Hashan's upper lip curled. Caislan grinned as if satisfied he'd made his point. Pent-up hostility and frustration aside, Caislan urged, pressing his point further, you will agree that you glide and eat and hunt the way you do because it's the life you've always known. You throw a fowl at me like I should be able to manage plucking it, but that is not my way. I will do what I must, the old Kosi grumbled, but I won't do it well, not because I'm unwilling to change. I am here, after all, far from my element, aren't I? Hashan averted his gaze. I won't apologize for being what I am, young Talakish, just like I'd never ask the same of anyone else. Hashan nodded sullenly. All the harm that had come to his people, and Kosi like this one had watched but done nothing. It wasn't right. All the good and more private times he shared with Simoa, they'd watched that as well? That definitely wasn't right. He wasn't blaming Caislan for living the life he'd been raised into. It wasn't fair. But then, he supposed he was blaming the old Kosi, wasn't he? Why was Caislan there? Why had he given up such a luxurious life? And why did he stare at him so intently sometimes like he was still studying him? He'd try to let the bitterness go. He would. It just wasn't that simple. There are fires in the swamps, Hashan noted stiffly. A change of topic to allow some lighter conversation. I noticed them a while back, Caislan confessed with a tired sigh. You know those sounds carried on the wind? They're building something. The Kamai clearly didn't die out in the war. Caislan shook his head, watching Hashan remove the one bird. The Talakish checked it first before cutting it open with the knife he'd cleaned and heated, then handed some meat on bone across. Caislan accepted the offering as politely as he could. Clearly not, Caislan agreed, staring at the near raw meat. You're not hungry? Hashan joked. Starving, Caislan admitted. I've just never seen the animal so dead before eating it. He shrugged uneasily. And we normally cook our food a fair bit longer. On this low fire, the Talakish mused pleasantly. Full cooking would take forever and give off too strong a scent. Unwanted company might pick up the low fire. Caslon frowned heavily, thinking long on Hashan's obvious delight. You don't have to enjoy my discomfort so much, you know. Hashan shrugged back. I have to enjoy something. A snap of a twig brought Hashan's head around. He quickly climbed the tree to gaze around, spotting the shadow that slunk cautiously their way. It was keeping its distance, and it was moving slow and low to the ground. The tail and head were lowly kept as well. She clearly spotted him in return. The shadow melted into long grass again. All movement stopped. We're being followed, he whispered down on the ground again. We have been followed from when we left the Kolai maze, Caslon returned matter-of-factly. Hashan stared across, unbelieving. It's a lone dosha, the Kosi explained. They don't attack alone, and even if it did, it's wounded, no doubt. You can fight, I take it. Hashan blushed. Then we'll be fine, and with us both awake, we're fine now. Eat. This actually isn't too bad, though it's still quite undercooked. Hashan growled, then turned back to the night. We'll post a watch. Someone always awake, he insisted. Caslon shrugging, then nodding distractedly. Hashan picked up his meat and took a few bites. It was all right. Too undercooked. He refused to admit as much for pride's sake. What does she want? Why follow us? You know it's a female? The body wasn't bulky and it moved freely. Males don't move that way. Caslon smiled. I won't argue. Hashan frowned. He had to wonder. Could this be the same one he'd fought before? The one that had kept him from getting help for Simoa?